Welcome into the Phoenix Downbeat. I'm your host, Drew Kreisman, along with my brother, Ira Kreisman. You know us as the Everything is Final Fantasy podcast, and we are joined once again and always by our friend Ryan Laney of Airship Overdrive. And on this episode, we go walking through a winter wonderland. If you sing it, you can't get demonetized. So you can't play it. But, and no, we're not playing Christmas music of Final Fantasy because I don't think technically that's a thing. But the closest we could get is winter or snowy. And Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you right away because what precisely are our parameters? What are our definitional words here? What is is it a genre of music?
Yeah, so this is one that because all three of us, we live in Colorado. We recently had our first proper snowfall, which was surprisingly late in the year. It was like December when we had a first snowfall in the Front Range. But I absolutely love icy, snowy, wintry, just kind of group it all together music in video games. And there's quite a few in Final Fantasy, obviously. And so I figured this would be a great opportunity for us, a great chance to just kind of talk about music that sounds like you are in winter and kind of all the things that go with that. We're going to do our usual thing we've done for some kind of like categorical music where we're going to look at three we looked at together or chosen together, and then do a couple surprise ones to talk about some interesting wintry, snowy, things along those lines kind of music. And we're going to talk a little bit about what makes something sound like winter, and of course look at the actual music from Final Fantasy and see if we can get some ideas of why it sounds so whatever verb or whatever adjective rather you want to throw in when you hear wintry music.
Ira, before I tell everybody what we're going to be talking about today, what were your thoughts when because we had to come up with our own surprise pieces for this. So how did you interpret the prompt, Mr. Teacher Librarian Man?
First, I wanted to pick something that was associated in game with winter and or ice. So a snowy region of some kind or an icy region of some kind. But there do seem to be certain qualities that, I mean, if you're just playing the menu music, when you go to the ice fields in Final Fantasy II, it's still just the overworld music, and I would not call that an icy or wintry theme. But when you go to Narsh and it's snowing, does it sound wintry because it's in an area that is literally snowing as the credits roll, or does it have other qualities? And so that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. Is I don't know that I have the definitional aspects to this down yet. I know what it sounds like when I hear it, but I don't know. I have some idea of what some of the qualities might mean. But this is then, are we defining it by what we think it is, or do we come up with the definition first and then find out what applies to the definition? That's some of your philosophy, speech and debate bullpucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Conceptual analysis.
Drew, did you have a frame of reference? Because this is once again, Ira's leading me into a perfect here's exactly one of the topics I wanted to discuss. But Drew, did you have some parameters?
Right, I would say I started similarly. Right, your mind first goes to places where it is snowing, where it is cold. Right, I will admit, and this is a clue for something that's going to happen a while from now, that I wanted to choose something that I felt like tested whatever parameters we were about to set out, something that might not be an obvious choice, just because some of the ones we're talking about today, I think, are really going to help us nail down what that sound is, right? What it is that we're hearing in these very, very snowy pieces. So, there are several. Ira mentioned one, so I'll do one that I'm not going to play today that we talked about from Final Fantasy II. The Tower of the Magi is a piece that sounds very, I've used the phrase dingy-chimey before, very echoey, very cavernous, very empty. Again, I'm sure we'll come back to a lot of these terms, right? But it is definitively not a snowy place. Nothing snowy or cold is happening. It's crystals, not snow.
Yes. And why does that, why did you even bring that up? Why does crystals make you think of winter?
Maybe it's a shimmering, reflective, vibe. I'm unsure. You're going to help us understand ourselves today, right?
Yeah, so this is a perfect segue. So there's two things that I want to kind of like encapsulate before we get into the actual samples themselves, about like winter music. The first one is that winter music in games, it tends to, not always, but it tends to use one specific instrument almost every single time that is a real world like thing. Can either of you guess what that instrument I'm talking about might be?
I have two thoughts: either chimes or jingle bells.
Yes. So sleigh bells is the fancy term, but jingle bells, sleigh bells, and the actual like legit term is called a crotal. That's like the old term for them, but I'm going to call them sleigh bells because that's like usually what they are referred to these days. And it's interesting because let me ask you guys, why do you think when you hear that ching, 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 why does that make you think winter?
I don't know. I mean, the obvious reason would be because I've been hearing the song Jingle Bells since I was since before I was, you're so used to it always being associated. Again, I think the closest I can come up with is that kind of shimmering way that, like, as snow falls, it sort of falls one at a time, plinky dinky dink, and then it's this shimmering thing that has a reflective surface, and I feel like those bells sort of sound reflective and shimmery.
Mm-hmm.
There is some environmental sounds when ice is falling or cracking that has some of that quality to it. I tend to think of that more as being those sort of glass bell sound, though.
Mm-hmm. So these are all correct answers and all things that I would say, yep, that's exactly makes sense. It checks all the boxes for the, like, can you support your argument of why it sounds like winter? And I'm going to go just briefly a little bit more into it. When you hear sleigh bells, and hopefully this is the part of the podcast where Drew overlays some nice little sleigh bell stuff over the top as I'm talking here. And it's interesting because it's an instrument that is a culturally reflective and naturally reflective sound. Originally, what was called a crotal, I'm just going to call it a sleigh bell, it was something that was literally put on horses as a way, like hundreds of years ago, like in the 1700s, as a way of showing, oh, here's part of this horse's dress, like part of like literally the reins and stuff that go on it. And it's just something that makes the rider, or if it's like part of royalty or something, it just shows off, look how rich we are. We can make little gold-plated, silver-plated, metal balls on the end of the horse, and it will make these sounds to make us just seem more noticeable, more bright, all those kinds of things, right? And so it's literally the thing that over the centuries, you can look up articles on this of how it kind of transferred from one thing to another. But in New England, in America here, around the 1800s into the 1900s, people would use sleigh bells on the, various armaments and dress, I don't know all the correct terms for this, on the horses, to the point where it became very closely related to anything that was like a horse-drawn carriage. And as use of horses for transportation started to go more out of style, well, it became a thing in America to have a horse-drawn carriage ride in winter. I was actually literally at dinner just like 3 nights ago, and we saw a random like downtown horse, drawn carriage up here where I live. I know down in Denver, they literally like run some around the town, or not town hall, the Capitol building every now and then. And it literally, as a result, over decades and decades, centuries of doing this, your brain starts to go, oh, that sound, ching, 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 that equals winter, because that's the only time culturally that we really see horse-drawn carriages in this matter being used this way. And so it just becomes very one-to-one. It also, like Ira was saying about like the very, kind of brittle nature of like being in ice, being in snow. Well, it's literally a super thin, brittle piece of metal with a smaller metal ball inside. That's all a sleigh bell is. It's like a loosely crafted cocoon of sorts, like a pistachio shell is roughly kind of what the architecture kind of is, with a metal ball inside. And as it rattles, it makes those rattling sounds. And so that very chimey, very dingy, as Drew would call it, sound, it translates to the brittleness of snow, the brittleness of ice super, super well. And then for the other part of this, the second part, as far as like being culturally implied, let me ask you guys this. Why do you think when you hear like Hawaiian music, why don't you think of yodeling?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Love
Okay.
that
Right.
question.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
very good. You first, Drew. This one's
That was a complicated question, right? It is. Yeah, it's just not culturally something that you associate, right? That yodeling tends to be associated more with people, well, up on mountaintops, right? You yodel. I'm pretty sure, I don't know the 100% history of yodeling here, but it tended to be something that was done. It would echo off the mountains. You would do it down the mountaintops, and in Hawaii they've got different topography, and so you would not necessarily need to do that. You would create music in a different way. And there are, of course, a lot of examples of this. I'm sure Ryan knows thousands of them, probably, of just ways in which what's always interesting to me too, though, is you'll have very similar but different, like woodwind instruments or flute styles. Like, why does a Japanese flute instrument sound very different from an Irish whistle, even though they might both be playing very similar instruments? And I'm sure it almost always comes down to these sort of, well, the cultural history of what the materials were around to build the instruments out of, and all of that. That's how you end up with the sounds that you end up with.
Yeah.
Did I do that thing again where I talk long enough that I eventually stumbled onto something?
And this is where Ira's going to step in and say, "Oh, here are the 4 words you meant to say, Drew."
Yep.
Well, the thing I want to say first is that we do know that there are mountains in Hawaii. In fact, it's basically mountains.
It's true. There are, but it's a different kind of mountain.
Right. And the mountains in Hawaii, as I understand it, are largely covered in vegetation, which is going to absorb a lot of that sound that might not be absorbed in a stereotypically icy northern mountain, I guess. I don't know. Obviously, I'm showing that I don't know foreign topography any better than Drew does. It seems to be largely cultural, and what we begin to associate at a young age based upon the cartoons we watched is going to be my guess.
Yeah. So if you think of, like in this example here, people didn't really, to my knowledge, they didn't really develop yodeling as a singing style in Hawaii, because yes, each of the islands is basically one miniature mountain, but you didn't really have to communicate from mountain to mountain because of how they're so isolated on essentially one peak per, right? Not exactly, but that's roughly how it is. But in Europe, in parts of like Switzerland or Austria, etc., think of The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews, spinning around singing. You would literally sometimes have to communicate from mountainside to mountainside across large distances. And so that very intense, very cutting sound of yodeling, it was developed as a way to communicate, which was then it was then what's the word? Kind of like added to or retained. There's a word for this. It evolved like into their music. It was what's the word? Integrated. Thank you. It was integrated into their music. And so as a result, you don't really hear yodeling anywhere outside of that kind of like, European soundscape. You do hear things that sound like sleigh bells in places that aren't, like kind of Western Europe and America, but they sound different. And if you were to hear something like what's called a rick, R-I-Q, which is like a small tambourine, basically from the Middle East, it sounds kind of like sleigh bells, but they're not quite the same thing. And as a result, you wouldn't hear them and go, "Oh, it sounds like a horse-drawn carriage," because your ear can tell that's not quite the same thing that we were hearing earlier. All this to say, all I'm getting at here is that the things we're going to talk about as we're going through this, think about, for the listener, your cultural kind of background and all of your cultural influences that might influence you to hear something and go, "Oh, it sounds like snowy ice of some kind." Whereas if you were to ask someone that maybe lives in South America or Australia, they might have a completely different answer for what snowy music, quote unquote, sounds like to them. But of course, we're going to talk about it from our perspective. So take it from our perspective.
So I know we have one regular listener in Australia. I'll be very curious to hear what his response is to conversation.
And are we expecting this, our snowy cultural sounds, to be largely Eurocentric or American-centric? Because it's not like there aren't snowy, cold places in Japan.
True. And I'll tell you right now, is actually, do you guys want to listen to a song first, or do you want me to do the other, like, culturally implied thing first? Your call.
I think we've already set a record for the longest we've gone into the podcast without playing any music. So maybe let's listen to one and then dive back into that, because I think it's going to be a relevant question for all of the music we're going to listen to today. So I didn't quite get to do a roadmap earlier, but that's okay. What we're going to listen to today is from Final Fantasy VII in just a few moments, Buried in Snow, a classic. From Final Fantasy X, Lake Macalania. And then from Final Fantasy XI, our first piece of Final Fantasy XI music we'll be diving into on the show. And we're fairly sure it's called Xarcabard. So as always, we'll do our best with the Final Fantasy XI stuff. And then, as Ryan mentioned up top, there will be 3 additional surprise pieces, though a little behind the scenes. We already know what Ryan's is.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite snow pieces, probably in all of Final Fantasy. I think it's my favorite, like, wintry one.
It's a really good one.
Yeah, but go ahead. Let's queue up. Well, which one did you have first again? It was the Buried in Snow from 7.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII never gets enough attention, so let's dive into it first.
Jiminy Christmas.
It sounds like winter,
Yes.
but why?
Because it sounds cold. That's the circular logic.
Why does it sound cold?
Yeah.
He had a follow-up.
Those glass bell, I assume that's meant to be a kind of a glass chime, glass bell sound.
Yeah, it's some kind of like either a music box sound or like a crystal. Like literally, there's sound fonts in MIDI that's just called like crystal type stuff.
Okay.
It's, as far as real world instruments though, it's some combination of like a glockenspiel, a bell, maybe a crotale, and maybe like some kind of keyboard. But it's a very like synthetic sound for sure.
Yeah.
How we're hearing it here.
So the things I heard over and over again was it's sort of a repetitive echoey sound, the bup, 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 bup. And so if you're in an icy cavern, I guess you might get an echo. I heard deliberate space between notes. It's not the quiet part of the song where you get to rest. It's just there's a lot of very staccato-y sounding space between notes. And then I feel like this piece and the piece I chose is in no hurry to get to the next part of the melody. And those are the things that make it feel very cold and deliberate to me.
Have either of you ever been, and I'll assume the answer is yes, but I could be wrong, being Coloradoans, have either of you ever been in a situation where you are like literally in the middle of snow all around you outdoors and you're like in a field or on the slopes somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It kind of sounds like that, right? And to what Ira was just saying on the part about like it sounds very echoey and it sounds very staccato, very short notes, right? That's kind of what it literally sounds like when you're in the middle of like a giant field or a forest and there's snow everywhere. Because when you're in a normal, like I'm saying normal as in like no snow, it's just a typical summer day, let's say. When you call something out at a distance, you can hear the delay, or not the delay, the dynamics when it gets softer as someone calls out at a distance, for example, because there's nothing really like inhibiting the sound from the person who's saying it to the person who's receiving it. But if you're in the snow, well, what might be inhibiting the sound getting from A to B?
Right, it's gonna be the snow.
It's literally the snow.
Yeah.
And so even though sound moves very well through a solid body, it does not move well through a solid, then fluid, then solid, then fluid, then solid body. If it's like snowflake into air, into snowflake, into air over and over again. So you might only hear the first parts of someone saying something or an instrument or a tree falling or whatever. It literally sounds like being in snow. Like that's literally what we're hearing as far as the, like, I guess, non-instrumentation stuff about how things sound very echoey. They sound very short, because that's literally what it sounds like. Drew, do you have something you were going to say about Ira's point there?
Yeah, I just have two very clear associations with the things he was highlighting there. Those echoey parts always have sounded to me like the way, and again, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you're walking through the snow, especially if you're by yourself and it's a big open field, that your pacing seems to somehow match the falling of the snow. And I think that bum, 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 bum is doing both of those things. It's the pacing of our characters slowly trudging through the snow, but it's also sort of the falling snow itself. And then the dingy chimies, the glass bells, that give us the closest thing we get to a melody here, always have felt to me like the things that you might look up and see that there is a little bit of life in the snow, because there's such stillness in those situations. Like you were just talking about, there's kind of a muffled stillness to being in the snow. But then you might see one bird go flying by, or one deer off in the distance scamper off there, or a bunny rabbit, go flying by. And it's those dun, 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 reminding you. And I said before, I always associate the Final Fantasy VII bells with the life stream. So it's that even in this cold, desolate, calm place, there's still a little bit of life. And so that's, how I interpret those things.
So Drew gets a point now for segueing something I'm going to bring up later, because the thing about stillness, one of the things that they do in this piece that Uematsu did in Buried in the Snow, that we're going to see in other pieces today as well, is how he basically takes something in one kind of like key center and really roots it into like one chord for a long time, and then we'll just kind of shift it ever so slightly. So it's like there's not a lot of hurry, like we were just saying. There's not a lot of motion. It's mostly stillness is generally what we're going for. So in this piece here, for example, we start off with what is basically laid down over a C major 7 chord, something like this. One of those happy, sad, happy chords we've talked about before. And it's implied with some of the melody stuff we hear later that it's actually going all the way up to roughly a sharp 11 chord. So we go from here all the way up to... And it's this nice impressionistic style, if you remember back to our impressionism discussion we had on an early episode. And it just sounds open. And we just kind of linger on that for a long time as the melody plays its bit. And it just kind of lingers, like I said. And then a little bit later, it might actually change to something different, but it's the same general structure where we might have this chord instead. But it just sits on that chord, whether it's the C chord, the G chord, whatever. And it only changes ever so slightly here and there, but it also moves in some unusual ways that are either like by a whole step, the whole thing kind of shifts over, or something else that's a non-diatonic shift, basically, right? Yeah. So we have all those sounds, all those like musical things that are influencing that you're in snow. We have some stuff that sounds like crystals as well, though. We mentioned one of the very first things was that, winter music sounds like crystals and brittleness, things like that. I'm going to play through a series of sounds on my keyboard here, and I want you guys to tell us, do you think it sounds like winter music, quote unquote?
Fun.
Okay.
Pop quiz.
So yeah, and there's no like right or wrong answer to this. There are some that I definitely chose like intentionally, but I'm just gonna play something, and you guys tell the listeners, does it sound like winter? So first off, just your classic piano. What would you say?
Sometimes I there are certain ways that a piano can be played that always makes me think of music, obviously, or music, winter, maybe not necessarily Christmas, but there's a very piano-y way, or I'm just all over this. I'm just doing a great job today.
Doing really good with the definitions.
Really
today.
good on my words. There's a very wintry way to play the piano. How about that? I'm gonna land on that.
Yes, definitional excellence.
Thank you. Jeez. I talk for a living. Ira, you say things.
The piano always sounds fairly neutral to me, unless you spice it up a particular direction.
All right, so here's the next one. Now, I'm not going to say what this patch is called, but would you say this is winter?
Yes.
Yes, I vote yes on this one.
Why?
Glass? It sounds like glass or tuned glass.
Glass.
There are people who can like play the wine glasses. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like brittleness, glass, right? The actual patch on my keyboard, it's called a music box. That's why there's like a slight echo as well. Sure. But yeah, something small, brittle, metallic, or glassy in some way. How about this one?
Not necessarily.
The faces on the camera are just like, no.
Yeah.
So that's the bassoon patch, just played really high, so it sounds more like an English horn in this scenario. But yeah, there's nothing really intrinsically wintry that strikes us, right? Unless there was, something else to support it. What about this one?
A little bit. I'm gonna go yeah.
The faint echoiness of it feels maybe wintry.
Yeah, so this is like an organ, like some sort of jazz organ, basically. Mm. And I would use the term breathy. It's a very like airy sound, which makes me think of like blowing air. But the instrument itself doesn't sound particularly wintry, but it has like a wintry element to how it's produced. So it's kind of like a weird in-between, right?
Yeah.
I got a few more. What about this one?
Again, kind of. Give it to me again. I guess it's the long fade that sounds kind of wintry to me.
Mm-hmm.
At first it doesn't, but once it gets muddier, once all three notes are there, it sounds a little wintry. The first two, I'm like, nah, but once the whole chord is down, I'm like, it feels a little wintry.
Yeah, it just kind of sounds like it's got this long, echoey delay, kind of washes over everything else, like a reverb almost. That patch, if you're curious at home, it's just a jazz guitar sound. It's got a very mellow tone to it, but it obviously is going to ring. It's going to resonate for a long time. Two more. What about this one?
Oh yeah, that's got all kinds of fun reverbs and echoes. Yes, winter.
Either winter or the 80s.
Yeah, it's a synth voice. Yeah, it's a synthesized vocal sound, so that matches both of those. But it again has that airy quality to it, right? So we're kind of branching out from just things that are made with metal or made with glass, crystal, and there's more elements to winter music. It can also just sound like literally blowing air. And then one more for you on this. Tell me, does this sound like winter?
Winter in space.
Why does it sound like space?
Because of old 70s flicks, I think.
Yeah.
Speaking of cultural association.
Put the alien sound
What's
on.
the instrument where you don't touch it? You just like interrupt the field or the air or something?
Yeah, the theremin.
That's the one.
Yeah, it kind of has that sound, right? This one's weird because there's a little bit of an after effect on this one where I think it's when you release the key, it does a weird sort of like analog synth thing where it jumps to a fifth above the note you were playing. So you hear that kind of like zippy kind of zoop sort of sound. If you hear that little like wah 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 wah, that's when you release the key. So it's a weird synthetic sound coming out, right? But all these things they perfectly kind of show what's going on when you hear a sound and you're like, oh, does that sound like winter music or not? There's so much more than just the sleigh bell, and we're going to hear them more coming up soon as well.
That's awesome. All right, now let us listen to Lake Macalania from Final Fantasy X.
What are your thoughts?
First of all, as almost all the things that we've already talked about, which is great, you get to be like, ooh, I recognize the stuff we've been mentioning, right? Have more synth presence and more percussion than the last track that we listened to. A bit more of a structure to it, which I found had me, depending on what part I was cueing in on a little bit more, felt almost as much like you might be sitting inside by the fire drinking a cozy cup of cocoa while having but you're still cold. You know what I mean? Like it's that thing. It's like the cold hasn't gone away, but there are a few moments that warm it up a little, and I'm not 100% sure why. But it's also just I feel like it doubles and triples down on echoey and chimey, and it is so. It surrounds your entire presence, where the other one felt a bit more empty. This one feels all around you.
Yeah, and we're hearing a lot of those same things that we just discussed, even if it's not like the same thing. We're hearing a lot of space and a lot of stillness between parts of the music. If you were to compare this to something like, the overworld music we listened to recently, it doesn't have that same pace of movement. It sounds very still, like you're kind of seeing one thing at a time. Even the drum parts there, they put space in, where you hear a little and then it literally has gaps between the drum part, which is really uncommon to have. Play a measure, rest a measure, play a measure, measure, rest a measure. That's really unusual. And at the very, very beginning, before we get these big synthy kind of wash chords that are basically built on fourths and fifths, what's the very, very first thing we hear? Do you guys remember what the very first thing was?
Was it the bells?
Yeah, it's this kind of like twinkly, chimey bell sound, right? And it's basically built around a pentatonic scale, something along these lines. But it just has that brittleness to it again, right? And the ones I'm playing here on my keyboard, they're not quite the same patch as what they play there, but it has that same spaciness, echoiness, brittleness, the things that we were just talking about earlier. And even though this song, I don't think has any actual sleigh bells in it anywhere, unless I'm just not hearing it, it still sounds like winter, doesn't it?
Yeah. And something else I heard was you mentioned the breathy, airy sound of the organ. This definitely has a wind sound.
They literally have this like
Yeah.
sort of thing happening. And I've checked it. It is pitched. It's not just like some random like air sound. It is pitched air blow or whatever you want to call it. It's because it comes from those big synth chords that we hear in the background, which, by the way, total tangent, one of my favorite sounds in the world is those like mid to late 90s, early 2000s video game like synth wash sounds, like when you start up the PS1. Oh, it's one of the best sounds ever. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. Yeah. So this one, yeah, same thing. Even though there's no sleigh bells, it sounds like winter. Any other thoughts on this one?
I just love the music of Final Fantasy X, and I love all the music of all the Final Fantasies, but we haven't gotten to much 10 just on the EIFF show. Yeah, I use the abbreviations. But it took you. Yes. I've never said that out loud before. I didn't love it. But yeah, we've done a couple of things here, but it's been like Xanarkand and Otherworld. Most of the game actually sounds kind of like this, or a lot of the middle parts of the game have this very ethereal vibe that I just love.
Yeah. Ira, anything else you have to say on that one?
No, I mean, I think we've basically said it. It sounds very slow, deliberate, chimey, dingy. Some environmental effects.
Yeah, this one's probably the simplest of all the ones that we'll hear today. It's basically that dingy, chimey stuff, big synth washes, and even then there aren't really any like strong melodies in this one. It's a very kind of wash sort of sound. So let's go to our last one for the prepared ones then. So, if I recall, none of us have ever really played Final Fantasy XI much, correct?
Right.
We always start.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always start our conversations on 11 by saying, "Sorry, we barely played this one."
Yeah, this is actually a good segue, real quick tangent. The most experience I had with 11 was when I was in college, a college freshman. I got paired up with someone my first semester to be roommates, so we didn't know each other beforehand. And one of the only things I remember about him is that he loved Final Fantasy XI, and I think EverQuest was the other one so much, he would literally leave a PC and a PS2 running at his desk in our shared room pretty much 24/7 to like do something. I don't know exactly what the full purpose was.
Right.
He'd go to class, come back, and immediately sit down and play 2 MMORPGs at the same time. So that experience kind of it detracted me from playing 11 because I was like, I don't want to turn into that.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
Don't want to be that guy. It's not supposed to be a job.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. But for this one, for the Xarcabard music, this is a snowy, wintry tundra area. I made sure to check that it was actually a snow place in 11. And this is not by Uematsu. This is by Naoshi Mizuta. And why does it sound or not sound, if you have an argument against, like winter?
Again, it's slow and deliberate. Man, this piece is not in a rush to get anywhere. It is taking its time to get to the next thought, the next even instrumentation. We did eventually get to harpsichord, which to me is aristocracy / vampire music. There's bass in this one where there wasn't, or it didn't feel like was in the other one.
It's way more prominent in this one. There was in the other one, but it's so like not functioning as a bass that I totally know what you're saying.
Okay. And so this makes it seem to me like we're 5 months into winter and we haven't seen the sun in 3 weeks. And it's just been snowing. And yeah, the adventure is well, we should all be inside having the hot cocoa, like Drew was saying earlier.
Drew?
I was struck by the instrument choices. I listened to this before we had the conversation, and I didn't realize to what extent you were setting me up. I was like, I got to go back and reassess what I said about the bassoon now. Clearly a winter instrument. Also, I noticed the part of dingy chiming bells were instead played in this by like a xylophone.
Yeah, it's a marimba, which is basically a more resonant xylophone. But yes, like if a lay person were to say xylophone, I would say, yeah, it's a xylophone because that's what you typically know. Most folks don't know what a marimba is.
But the reason I was going to think of that is because I was like, isn't that the one that's just a little more vibraty, echoey, chimey, right? It's more bouncy. And and this, boom, again, it's back to that pacing and it's plodding through the snow as the snow falls. So that the melody is handed off from bassoon, which I emphatically declared earlier was not a winter instrument, to the harpsichord, to kind of an interesting flute thing. There's a woodwind. I don't know if it was a clarinet or
yeah, it's like a pan flute of some kind, which again lays into that whole thing of like something that could be made with like an old animal bone, like an old femur or something. And yet in the winter, you want that wispy, blowy air sort of sound of like frictional air, I would call it, against the snow falling. And so a pan flute is a perfect example of, it sounds like blowing snow. It just does.
Yeah.
I will say the bassoon is a winter instrument when it's played in Peter and the Wolf, which is my go-to early music theory example.
Yeah, and see, we have more cultural influences on why you hear something based on your background, your foundational knowledge, right? If someone were to always play like a kazoo when they had hand puppets on some children's show, you would eventually hear a kazoo and instantly in your mind's eye see a hand puppet or say, oh, it's like a hand puppet. That's what I'm going to see soon. And then, Jason Statham pops up and you're like, wait, there were kazoos. Why is Jason Statham here?
Well, the other thing, can I add one more to that? I know we keep going on the same thing, but Aaron and I have talked about the oboe plays oftentimes the role of like the solo hero out on a journey because you only hear one at a time. And typically you get oboe as a part of the big overworld theme. And I think they're purposefully, you take it, if you put it on the bassoon, which is like a bass version of an oboe, again, you typically only hear one. And here in isolation, if you surround it with the right things, kind of like I was saying about the piano earlier, in the right context, you can make it very wintry. So a bassoon, if it's maybe doing something more heroic in the orchestra, you might be like, nothing wintry about this at all. But in this context, it's now the hero all by themselves plodding through the snow. And Final Fantasy XI, one of the very few things I do know about it, is it's a game you play on your own. Unlike the other Final Fantasies where you've almost always got a party with you, in the MMOs, you're by yourself a lot. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, winter music can reflect isolation as well. You're by yourself, in this case, in like a massive tundra with not much as far as civilization or even like, vegetation and trees and whatnot or wildlife around you. This is a cool piece because it's a good departure from the more, I'll say, like upbeat ones we heard earlier. But Buried in the Snow, honestly, is a pretty like light piece compared to what you might hear for someone who's like, oh, you just snowboarded down a mountain and now you are lost in the middle of nowhere. It's actually pretty upbeat for what you're doing in the game. But this one, the very first thing you hear is these really crunchy C minor chords where we have a D and an E flat being played against each other, because all we hear at the beginning is just and it's so just like unnerving, right? It's like you're unsettled, like there's something wrong about to happen, even though we're just in a typical kind of C minor setting. Having those two notes together over and over, it sounds like unease, but it's on a marimba, so it sounds like the brittle, or it sounds like the, dingy, chimey kind of xylophone, type stuff that we've been talking about. So it accomplishes two goals. Like literally just this one sound does two things to like kind of, show, oh, it's winter. Oh, it's something snowy, icy, whatever have you. This one's also structured in a really interesting way with Drew, you have something?
Oh, I was just going to say, especially because you said the word icy as you were playing it, just because we were doing this the other night with our little one who's walking out there on the icy streets of Denver now. As you played that boom, ding, it reminded me of the very careful steps that you take when you are walking in the ice and trying not to drop your baby.
Yes, 2 points for Drew. I was going to mention this on a later one about how it can be very slow and prodding because you don't know if there's either ice below you, maybe there's something that might jump out of the snow and get you. It's very cautious music compared to the usual, like, one of the other ones I think of frequently is like, if you play Diddy Kong Racing, which has a great soundtrack by David Wise, there's a kind of like rockabilly type song on one of the winter race tracks in that game. But because they add sleigh bells, it sounds like winter. But the song itself is super like jazzy and upbeat and everything compared to, oh, something dangerous is happening in this winter setting, right? There's two very strong dichotomous parts of the spectrum when it comes to being in the snow. In some cases, it's really great and joyous, and in some cases it's literally life-threatening, right?
Yes.
You ever driven I-70 in the winter? Yeah.
Going 35 miles an hour on the highway.
Well, some of us are, but some of them are zooming past us, and like, you guys are going to go off a cliff.
I don't know how those cars do that. There was one time I was coming back from a birding trip, and there were 4 or 5 of us in a car together, and the guy driving, he was going 35 miles an hour, and he was just like, sorry guys, this was literally on I-70 coming east, and he was like, sorry for going so slow guys, and we were all like, hey, we are in no hurry to get to the hospital, man. Like, you take as long as you want.
Seriously, 100%.
So the other part of the Xarcabard one that I think is really interesting is when the melody comes in, I know we said we weren't going to talk about Christmas songs, but does this melody not sound like a particular Christmas song to either of you?
Wow. I never would have thought that.
Be home for Christmas.
Yeah, they use essentially it's similar, but it's like the I'll Be Home for Christmas melody a little bit. But they also do a weird thing here that Mizuta does that Uematsu rarely does in his music that's designed to loop over and over again. And he actually ends the phrase by resolving on the tonic, by resolving on the one of it. So after a while of doing all this kind of dancing around, and we have all that stuff, etc., if it was Uematsu writing it, I guarantee he would end that phrase on some sort of like borrowed chord or some sort of unusual like hiccup sort of thing, where it might be like a, and we just kind of linger on that for a while. But if you listen to the full melody again, listener, go back to when it was played, it actually ends on C in the key of C minor, which is weird to have it actually just end that way. And whenever I listen to music from the Final Fantasies that weren't done by Uematsu, that's one of the things that jumps out to me, where I just go, oh, that's not something he would have done typically, because it's just not part of his, kind of musical vocabulary or musical tendencies. But overall, a cool piece. I like this one quite a bit.
Yeah, it's super neat. I'm glad we got to listen to some 11 music. So like we said before, normally this is the part where we guess and we get surprised, but we had to play this one. Ryan had to play this one, and I totally agree. So why don't you just set up our first bonus piece of music for us?
Yeah, so this one I had to reserve it so that no one else could take it, because I want to talk about it so much. And even though it's technically not winter music, it's technically a place covered in salt from a long dead sea. This is one that it's clearly winter for many reasons you'll hear. This is the Salt Flats from Final Fantasy VIII. I love it. It's so good. Can you guess why I love this for winter music so much?
Because it's really good. There you go first this time. I've got some ideas, but you go.
Well, it's got jingle bells for one thing.
For one, we hear the sleigh bells and triangle. So we've got two brittle metallic instruments right from measure one. What else?
We got those big open like synthy vocal sounds that are very, oh, it's winter.
Yeah, a combination of like some sort of breathy, airy sound plus very slow, plodding harmonic progressions that play into each other. So we've got two of our like big winter things already. What else?
It's also got that echoey sound that we talked about.
We hear echoey parts in multiple sections of this. And then there's one more, like, of the notable things we've discussed here. There's one more thing.
I'm blanking on it. I'm missing. I gotta
if you listen to where the main melody is played, it's generally played on a very brittle sounding piano, which is not quite like a glockenspiel or chime type thing, but it's serving that same purpose, that plus harp that we hear back and forth. So we hear these staccato sort of, struck instruments that could be easily replicated with like glockenspiel, marimba, things like that. Uematsu chose to use a piano and a harp in this case instead. But basically, like 4 of the big things that just scream, it sounds like winter, are in this piece from the very beginning. Something else that's really interesting in this one, I'm going to ask you guys to listen to something here in a second. Oh, no, bring it back. I'm going to have you listen to it. And I want to ask you a question here. So when we hear this song, there are some parts of it that might be pulling your ear one way as far as the pulse or like the rhythm that it's in, and some things pulling your ear another way. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do, listen to the first, like just not even a minute or so, whatever Drew's discretion is. And I want you to listen to it and tell me if you hear it as groups of 3 or groups of 2. So as in, do we hear da 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 dun 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 da da dun dun dun, or do you hear it as do do da 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 dun da da dun da da dun do da da dun dun? So play the first few seconds and tell me which one you hear the most.
I think I know the answer to the question.
There might not be an answer to it. It's literally like, so what would you say, Drew?
The reason I said it that way is because at the very beginning, I clued in on the relationship between the sleigh bell and the triangle. And I was hearing 2s. They're going back and forth with 1, ding, ching, ding. And that's what I was clued in on for a bit. Once I started listening to the bass line, it has a very bum, 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 3 notes at a time, sort of walkie note. So when I clued in on that, I was like, oh, that's where I feel I'm in 3 area, whereas the other instruments put me in 2 area. That's what I got.
Ira?
Ryan, are you one of those guys who can like do 3 on one hand and 2 on the other? Because I've never been able to do that. It sounds like witchery. Every time I've seen somebody do it.
Oh, yeah. I can do 4 on one hand, 3 on the other, 2 on one foot, and 5 on the other foot.
That's ridiculous to me. I hear this in 3. I hear dun, 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 dun.
So you both hear it as what you'd call like 6/8 time, where it's very 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right.
What I love about this piece, and this is going to get into a little bit of what happens right afterward in Final Fantasy VIII, is that they have this stuff where if you listen to some instruments, like if you listen to just the sleigh bell by itself, and then the like little string parts at the top that go pop, 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 every now and then, you could easily say, oh, it's clearly in like a 3/4 time, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and there are parts of even the melodies and the bass line that also support that, but there's enough that supports the more 6/8 feel, da 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 da, and bass line parts, the triangle that Drew pointed out, that you could hear it either way. I think it's so clever that Uematsu, with these very simple things, he's making you feel potentially a little disoriented. This is a part of the game where the characters are a little bit lost. They're not quite sure what they're looking for. And he puts that in the meter by just making you have to like hear one way in 2s and then in one way 3s. If the characters, if you follow them along, do you guys remember what happens right after the Salt Flats? Like what large city they enter?
Spoilers, man. It is kind of, but yes, also that's when you get to Esthar, right?
Yeah, that's where you go to Esthar, and Esthar's music, called Silence in Motion, which is a weird, bizarre piece of music, does the same thing, where there are parts where it's in some sort of 6 overall, but you could feel it as 1 and 2 and 3 and, or you could feel it as one triplet, two triplet, one triplet, two triplet. I think it's so cool how he went from the salt flats and then just kept that feeling of like metric ambiguation going when you finally got there, because as those of you who have played the game might know, Esthar is a weird place where you don't know what's going on when you get there. And there's some funny story beats that happen in the characters' dialogue in the first like 5 minutes of like, what is going on? Where are we?
Oh, I love that part of that game, and never realized that about those pieces of music, both of which I love very, very much. Silence and Motion, we will definitely talk about someday.
Yeah, I want to do an episode of why does it sound so weird?
Yes.
And I guarantee that'll be one of the ones that we discuss.
Is it time to guess at what Ira chose?
I know he's talked about the space stuff from 4 frequently, which you could argue has some crystalline sort of effects to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to guess that he went with something from 9, like Estogaza or one of those cold places.
That would be really interesting. Now, I feel like the easy guess for me and the temptation for him would have been to choose Mystic Quest once again. And I think it's entirely possible he went that route because there's actually a pretty nifty little piece of ice music from Mystic Quest. So I guess I will make that my official guess, because I also thought of Estogaza. So I feel like we've got a good coverage there.
I bet you're right.
Ira, would you? Oh, is it in the chat? I just need to bring it up. We'll all find out together. Yes.
So Mystic Quest it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've never played all of Mystic Quest. Ira, what's happening in the game during this music?
Yeah, this is for the wintry cavern / ice pyramid. It's a dungeon music. And I chose it, one, because I think Mystic Quest needs a little more love. Not a whole lot more, but a little bit more. And I think it does a good job sounding cold. Again, it's the space between notes. It sounds like it's just going to repeat that sort of 20-25 second thing over and over again. But it has a little bit more going on, but you don't get to it until a little later. So it's in no rush to get to that next part of the melody. Again, it's got the echoey sounds, the sort of chimey glass chime, crystal chime sounds. I think it's a nice little piece. And it's also got the sort of funk rock vibe that a lot of Mystic Quest does. So in the same, you know how in Final Fantasy V, all the characters look like themselves even when they go to other jobs. Mm-hmm. Mystic Quest sounds like itself even when it's in the winter, even when you're in the sort of the rock club and Fireberg or whatever. Even when you're in a living tree, it still sort of sounds like Mystic Quest. And I like that about it.
Yeah, it has all the elements, not all the elements, but it has the elements that we've talked about where there's like that space between stuff. This one also, I'm already eating my words because when I was talking about, oh yeah, having a drum part just like play and then stop and play and stop, that's really unusual. But look at that. In this one again, they did the exact same thing. Those little parts where it's like, ba-da-do, ba-da-do, ba-da-do. ba-da-do, ba-da-do, da-da-do, and the drums kind of echo that as well. They kind of follow along with it.
Yeah.
It's a cool piece, and it does have some funk, has some syncopation to it, and the chords, from what I can hear, they break the rule we've been following so far, where it's like we just kind of sit in one thing and it's very still for a long time. But it's hard to do that and maintain those kind of funk bebop sensibilities that you were talking about. So they clearly took some elements of what we've been discussing here and used them, and some they said, nope, we don't need those parts. We're going to do this instead, which is totally fine. It's your music. You make it how you want to sound.
Yeah. That game does have a pretty great soundtrack, and it's also very literal, which it's often been described as, baby's first JRPG or whatever. But it is funny that it's got an ice cave and a town called Fireburg and a forest town. It's just like, and all of the music is like I said, it keeps you in that funk rock place, and except for when battle happens and it goes full metal on you just for fun. But it's always giving you like bits and pieces of very standard, this is what ice sounds like. And so it's great to review, I think, all the things we talked about today.
Yeah. All right, Ira, what's Drew's, you think?
Oh, Drew's. What did he do?
What did he do?
I will say I've got two potential pieces pulled up. If you guess the one, I'll play that one and just mention the other one that I thought of. I will shout out right now, while everyone's thinking of a guess, also that Esto Gaza from 9 is the best piece of wintry music that's not going to get played on the show today, and it's too bad because it's great. I think Salt Flats just does almost the same stuff a little bit better. But
yeah, they're very similar. Esto Gaza has more of like the moving tonality shifts that Salt Flats doesn't really do very much. Yeah. I know Drew's been say what?
It's nice though. Esto Gaza is a really nice piece of music for when it's snowing outside and you're sipping your coffee.
Yeah, I was actually just listening. I know we played some music from Xarcabard recently. Either she just put out or just happened to be put into my YouTube algorithm recently. She has a cover of Esto Gaza that's really beautiful. High recommendation. Yeah. But I know Drew's always trying to get more stuff from like Final Fantasy 13 and 14 as well. And I know 13 has some wintry areas, so I'm guessing he pulled something from 13.
There's a part from 15 where you finally find, well, it's spoiler-ish, but once you're headed toward the end game and you make a stop on the train, there's a very wintry, very cold, icy place for various reasons. So I thought about that. I also thought about the Ice Age music from Chrono Trigger, if we wanted to take a left turn somewhere. If I have to have an official guess, just for the sake of variety, I'm going to go with the 15. God, can I even remember what that sounds like?
Yeah, it's weird because like these are all later games, because like Final Fantasy 1 through 6, they don't really have dedicated ice music hardly at all. You could argue Terra's theme, kind of, but no, not really.
All right. So I'll give a shout out. Ryan's closest to the pin on this, and I'll play the piece of music in a second. I want to mention two things from Final Fantasy 14 that I very much considered. I wanted to do the music from Ishgard. It's really great, but you've got to listen to it for a while for it to make its entire point. And it's also, we can come back to it with a future like town or city music place, because I want to listen to that one. And also from that one, a piece of music that we have to listen to for like 4 or 5 minutes for it to make its whole point. But Shiva's theme, once you finally face off against Shiva in Final Fantasy 14, something musically brilliant and magical happens. And I thought about sneaking it onto the show, and I was like, no. If you had guessed at it, I would have been like, okay, we're sitting down and we're going to listen to that. But we'll save that for another date. Those who know. So since Ryan said the correct name of the game, I'm going to just play this piece of music, ask everyone whether or not it counts, warn you right now that if you've been turning everything up because it's been so quiet on today's show, you might want to turn your headphones down just a little bit.
wake me up each time.
Right? Hell yeah, though. Do either of you remember exactly what that is?
I've not played all of 13.
This is Snows.
God damn it, Drew. You absolute dork.
Look, I almost talked myself out of this, but I think there's stuff in there very similar to what we talked about today, just interpreted on an electric guitar. And so, like, all of the instrumentation is clearly different, right? This is our biggest stretch of the day, but I do think you've got some interesting spacing, plotting of those heavy chords, chum, 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 which, as you mentioned, is almost exactly the same as that Evanescence song. But that feels like plotting through the snow. When the high-end melody comes in on the guitar, I feel like it's very bright, cold, that kind of idea that we've talked about. So I knew this was going to be a stretch going in. Like I said, I can go back and play the 5-minute long Shiva song.
No, I think it's so funny enough. Yes, the character Snow, this is their theme. And funny enough, 3 of the things we've been talking about are present in this that Drew almost got all of them just now. It has space between stuff. Even at the very beginning, you hear the dunk, dunk, chunk, gunk, and then it just kind of pauses for a while and then it comes back. So we have space. We have those high frequency brittle sounds almost where it's like these almost like harmonics coming out on the guitar, very, very high range, but also somewhere in there. I don't know if it's just because of like the way I'm hearing it in my headphones or like over our recording software, but it sounds like there's some sort of a tambourine, sleigh bell, hi-hat jingliness to those percussive parts in the beginning. That's not quite a tight hi-hat. There's something more rattly to it, which sounds like sleigh bells. So it works for me.
The very beginning also, I assume it's a cymbal or a cymbal sound, sounded at first to me like breaking glass or breaking ice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going to name your character Snow, presumably you're going to put some of those elements in there, right? So yeah, I figured if I couldn't think of it myself, I could at least ask you. And yeah, there's some stuff in there that I thought was really fascinating. And again, I was like, since we've kind of covered a lot of the very literal, I was curious to see if I could come up with something that would stretch the bounds about as much as you could and still be like, no, I could see why you would get a winter vibe from that. Maybe that wouldn't be the first thing you would think if you heard it out of context and didn't know the character's name was Snow. Maybe not. But yeah.
I like it as a pick. It's a nicely out of the box pick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some other songs. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about other games for those of us who might be aspiring composers, arrangers in the audience today. Some other games that I think do the ice winter stuff really well. The Ice Cavern music from Ocarina of Time, I think, does it really well. They implement a lot of this crystalline kind of tonal shifting, lots of space and echoey stuff in it. Does it really well. The back in the past kind of like Ice Age type stuff that was mentioned from Chrono Trigger does it really well. If you play Octopath Traveler 1, both the Flames Grace area and the character theme for the character from Flames Grace, Ophelia, both of those songs also do the like very, bundle up inside, it's cold outside sort of theme very, very well. Do either of you have any other like wintry themes from non-Final Fantasy games that you wanted to recommend?
Half of John Williams' catalog. Oh, wait, you mean video game stuff? Yeah, I'd have to think a little harder on that. There's probably some other good ones out there that I hadn't thought of. Metal Gear Solid has some pretty good winter areas, and it always has good music, but nothing specific comes to mind.
The Mario games always do environments really well. The deserts sound like deserts. The snowy places sound like snowy places.
Yeah, Koji Kondo's good. he's very good.
He does good stuff. Even way back in Mario 3, like the snowy ice level, it's like 5 or 6, whatever that world is. It does it surprisingly well for being on an NES sound cart. Like it's pretty solid.
Oh, I've got one. It's maybe my least favorite off of the soundtrack, but there's no B- even on the Mega Man X soundtrack. How about your Chill Penguin?
Ooh,
Mhm.
good call. I would have forgotten about that one. Has that intro that's like the and it sounds like those echoey, chimey sort of things, but in the future because it's the future, 20XX or whatever. Good call.
Yeah, Mega Man music is always good. And my first thought was, there aren't any real. I was like, but X does. Does Iceman have?
I don't remember what Iceman from one. I don't remember what his theme sounds like at all.
No, me neither. So I'm going with Chill Penguin. Yeah, I'll sneak some in because it's a great track, and we haven't mentioned Mega Man X yet. What a soundtrack!
It's
Banger
bangers
after
front to
banger.
back, just bangers front to back.
So good. All good.
Sure.
Sounds good.
End it on praising Mega Man X. Why not? That's it for this episode. Now go inside and get yourself some cocoa. Hey, thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who has reached out to us. Feel free to let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned, plus any questions you may have or any piece you would like to hear in the future down in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to Everything is Final Fantasy on Patreon, YouTube, social media, and of course your favorite podcast app. And please do the same for Airship Overdrive, Ryan's project, where you can hear arrangements of some of your favorite video game music. Join us next time as we explore the theme of love and one of hate from Final Fantasy IV. Don't you start. No. What if I changed it this time? I'm not going to.